That movie sucked.
I kind of liked it.
Movie Night Crew Network.
Hello and welcome to Content and Capable, a podcast all about following your passions while still feeling like a proper adult. My name's Sam and I'm your host. This week I spoke to independent author Lincoln Law all about his journey with self-publishing and writing. Welcome to the podcast, Lincoln. It's lovely to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Of all things, I always like to kind of start the podcast explaining where I've ended up finding guests, because I think people think it's a bit of a mystery of where I find guests. But this one came from a suggestion from a previous guest, Damien, and he and I chat every now and then, and he suggested that I should totally talk to you, especially about your work in publishing. But on a more broader sense, I was doing some digging. I wasn't finding dirt or anything, but as a queer author as well, I was just fascinated as to what that looks like. I've spoken with other authors and bits and pieces, but it's always interesting to hear it from a slightly different perspective.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No, good.
So, when did you get into writing in general?
Writing has been a passion of mine since I would have been in year 7, so I would have been 12 or 13. The joke I have is that our teacher gave us a writing task and it got out of hand. So it was like, write 400 words, so like a page. And I was like, can I write like 10? And my teacher, being, not wanting to discourage me, was like, yeah, that's fine. And so I handed in this what is essentially a short story. It would be, maybe 2,000 words or so. It was very straightforward. It was like a boy rescues someone from a dragon, like very straightforward fantasy story.
Yeah.
And sort of what happened from there was I ended up just really enjoying the writing side of things. I really enjoyed the idea that I could have this image in my head and I could put it down in the page and make it sort of live there. And so shortly after that, I started writing what eventually became my first book. And then after you write your first one, you go, well, time to write the second. And then it just sort of kept, it ended up being this thing where throughout my teenage years, I just became that kid who wrote books. At the end of year 12, they hand out those awards where it's like, best tan goes to obviously the palest person in the school.
Yeah.
Most likely to get pregnant, all that sort of really fun, slightly offensive things. And my award, I remember being bummed out because my award was creative writing. And I was like, you couldn't think of a creative name for the creative writing award? Most likely to beat J.K. Rowling? I don't know, be a bit more creative. But it just ended up I guess spiraling from there.
Yeah.
And now it's sort of just become something that I do most days.
Yeah. And, when you finished school and obviously gotten the award and whatever, did you end up going and studying writing at university, or what did that look like beyond school?
I did, actually. So originally when I finished high school, I took a gap year and sort of used that just to work and write. And my goal, I didn't tell anyone, but my goal was to try and get published so that I don't have to go to uni. Yeah. And obviously that didn't happen because I was not a good writer at that point.
Yeah.
And so I went to uni and originally studied to do teaching, realized I hate kids. I shouldn't say that. I don't hate kids. I realized that I wasn't good with difficult kids because I'd always grown up in the top classes, really good students, really studious students, and the worst student in the class was mostly just maybe a little bit churlish to the teacher.
Yeah.
Whereas I was suddenly dealing with people who, are going to drop out the second they can and go work in the mines, or, and their parents are like that as well. So they're built up in this culture where it's school's not that important. You can make a perfectly good amount of money not doing that. So I realized teaching wasn't for me, and so I dropped back the teaching part and just did a English and history arts degree. Graduated with that, and then originally it was going to be a Masters of Writing, which is where I met Damien. We did our Masters of Writing online together.
Yeah.
But I got about a semester and a half through it and just felt like I wasn't, besides the social aspect of having these people that I could connect with, I didn't find I was learning anything new that I couldn't get, that I hadn't gotten elsewhere, or that I couldn't get somewhere else without getting another HECSTET.
Yeah.
So I sort of pulled away from that, but graduated with a graduate certificate in writing. And then because I'm a glutton for punishment, I then went back again and did a Bachelor of Communication majoring in media production, which, while not writing exactly, it does still use the similar creative part of my brain for essentially like a different type of creativity.
It's interesting you do mention the Bachelor of Communication. Of all things, my journalism degree falls under a Bachelor of Communication. I'm very upset by it because it used to be run as a Bachelor of Journalism, but they've lumped it in with a communication. But it's fascinating to speak with other comm students, and it is a lot of writing. Like, even for myself, it's just a lot of writing, left, right, and centre, and you get to the point where you go, I could be writing pretty much in any context at this point.
Absolutely. Like there's some rules that are, I think the Bachelor of Communication, because while I wasn't majoring in journalism, I did some journalism courses.
Yeah.
And there is some professional writing tools and like processes that you do with professional writing that really helped me with my creative writing as far as, conveying information clearly, like just generally like the reverse pyramid that they give you, where it's like you start with the main crux and then you build out from there, and the idea being like, okay, if you need to cut it down, you can get rid of the last paragraph. It's like there's lots of stuff like that which sort of then I was able to take away and apply to my creative writing. And same with like, because it was media production, we got to do script writing, and script writing is a very different type of writing to prose, and it was a really good chance for me to like work on dialogue, because script writing is mostly dialogue. So it's like there's all that sort of stuff that you end up taking away from it, and it's so much writing. Yeah,
it is. And of all things, and I admit this way too often for someone who is in journalism, I am not a good writer. I reread a Year 6 English assignment. I think it was about 2 years ago I reread it. And I looked at it and I was like, where did this come from? Like, it is the most confusing, hard to follow thing. And I got an A for it. I was like,
oh my.
How did my teacher give me an A? What did I do that my teacher gave me the A? I was just, it was very... And like through high school, I never really got particularly good grades in English. I was passing, I was doing fairly well, but it wasn't up to the standard that I felt that like I should be for someone who enjoys communicating. And it is still a frustration. I'm sitting here procrastinating, writing 3 analytical essays because I just don't want to sit down and try to figure out how I'm going to write something in 2,000 words.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
It's such a, like, I think to touch on like 2 parts of that, the not being a good writer, there is something to be said for being able to be a clear writer. Like, like the words that you write can be incredibly utilitarian and workmanlike and can do the job. And it doesn't matter that it's not beautiful. What matters is that it's conveying the information. And something I've learned, my day job is working in insurance, and I'm an advisor. And so basically my job is at the moment to go through the website and update the information on it. And the process of taking information and trying to convey it clearly is, while not creative, is a really hard thing to do, and it doesn't come naturally. So while you may not think yourself as like a good writer insofar as the writing's not beautiful, you do still have the ability to communicate really clearly, and I think that's really good. And touching on the reading stuff from like Year 6 or whatever, that's me going back to my earlier novels and looking at the first couple of books I wrote and going, there are moments in there where it's like, okay, this is good, this works. But some of like the plot stuff I look at and I'm like, oh, that hasn't aged well. Lincoln, were you a little bit sexist in your teenage years? Like, it's sort of like a relief that it didn't get published, because it's like, there's parts of it where it's like, oh, I am not that person anymore. And not that makes it sound like, there's some tremendously juicy stuff in there. It's really not. It's it's like, Lincoln, you didn't understand how the world works when you were 15. Shock horror.
Shock horror, yeah, 100%. I was a very naive 15-year-old. I still tell people that I'm a quite naive person. I always like to think the best in people. So it makes some people quite frustrated at me, but that's fine. And so, as you said, you kind of were in and out of uni. What then prompted you to get to writing and publishing your first book?
Well, so technically, this is not my first book I'm publishing. Technically, the first trilogy I wrote back in high school, I did self-publish on a very, very, very small scale. I think I sold maybe 150 copies of all 3 books. I pray they never see the light of day. See my earlier statement about not being 15 anymore.
Yeah.
So it's not my first one, but it's the first time that I've tried to give it like a red hot go. Mm-hmm. So the publishing industry, for anyone who's not inside it, it's really quite funny because you have a lot of people who don't understand how the publishing industry works and thinks you go to a publisher and you say, I've got a book, and they go, great, let's publish it. And that's all that happens. And it's really not, it's like, there's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of like submitting and resubmitting and all that sort of stuff. And basically what it came down to was back in 2017, technically back in 2016, I wrote the book that I self-published now. It's called A Crown of Blood. And in 2017, it got shortlisted for a publishing prize. It's called the Ampersand Prize. It's run by Hardy Grant Egmont. They do it once every year or so. And the goal is essentially to publish a new author. And my book got shortlisted, so it was one of, I think, 6 books that got shortlisted. Mm-hmm. And all the books were very different, and they were all really interesting sounding. I was really annoyed that it turned out that they all sounded really good. And I was like, I wanted mine to sound good and everyone else's to sound crap, but they all sounded great. Yeah. And I was like, oh, shit, I've got competition. And it ended up not winning. Which was a bit of a blow, because I thought it was a sure thing. At that point in time, there were all these things. I was like, I'm in, I'm the winner, I've definitely got this, and I didn't win. Yeah. And, like Icarus, I flew too close to the sun. So I ended up just being a little bit upset about it. But, at this point in time, that was my 20th book, I think. So I was like, I'm used to rejection, I'm used to this, let's just keep going. And then during COVID, which I think affected, a lot of people in different ways, I found myself really struggling to write, which is something that, because I do it most days, it's weird if I don't do it. Yeah. And I know I'm down or depressed because I'm not writing. And I sort of didn't have anything new I wanted to write. I didn't have anything that I really wanted to explore. So I sort of looked at it and went, okay, do I have something there that I can go back and write, or a sequel that I can write where it's like, it's a familiar world. I don't have to do as much groundwork, but I can sort of get the juices flowing again. Yeah. And I looked back at A Crown of Blood and I was like, okay, I'm going to read it and see if it's aged okay. And it did. It needed a little bit of fixing, but besides that, it was fine. And so I was like, okay, if I can write book 2 and finish it, or get close enough to finishing it, then I will self-publish book 1 and I'll give it a good go. Part of it came from, I joined a Facebook group called, what is it called? 20 Books to 50K. And it's basically a group of self-published authors who all support each other. And the idea is, once you've published 20 books, you will probably be making around 50K a year. Now, there's work that goes into that, and there's like marketing, and it's quite an interesting thing. I haven't engrossed myself in it enough to be able to talk about it too knowledgeably, but they were all making a really good go of it, and they were making enough money that, some of them could quit their job. And I was like, self-publishing isn't the slush that it used to be. Yeah. People don't take it with as much disdain as they used to. It's a much more legitimate venture now. And especially in the case of myself where I was like, I'm not getting rejected because the books are bad. Like A Crown of Blood got shortlisted for a publishing prize. It was obviously good. I'm getting rejected because either it's, it's a weird fit for the market, or they're already publishing a book that's really similar. Hardy Grant came out with a book, like the same publisher that shortlisted it, came out with a book with a few, while the plots are vastly similar, it's a vastly different audience for each book. It had some similar elements, and I was like, that might be why they rejected it, because it was just too similar to this other book.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I budgeted it out, and I said, okay, if I can sell this many copies to friends, then the initial outlay of this book will be paid for. And I hit that target. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm just going to try and self-publish it and give this a red hot go. And so as of, I think April 10 is like the launch. And then April 11 is like the official release date. So I get to do that. And then like selfishly as well, the third part of it was I have people come up to me and they're like, oh, you're a writer. Where can I get your books? And for the longest time, I'm like, you can't. And so it's kind of nice that I can now be like, oh, it's available online. Like you can go order it from Amazon. You can order it from Booktopia. You can, I haven't figured out which bookshops can sell it yet, but I am figuring that out as we speak.
Well, that's the interesting thing about self-publishing as well, is that, I've got some friends who run a publishing business, and it's, it's really, really interesting that, like, it's all in-house. They edit, they'll help market, they'll send it off to the printers, they'll make sure it all works and everything is good for you, but you've got to do that yourself. So there's like so much extra legwork that you've got to do yourself in making that book happen.
Absolutely. That's been probably the biggest learning curve, is like how much time some of this stuff takes. I had one of my initial, I suppose, humps that I had to get over was I was really nervous about people who wanted the book, because I grew up in Coffs Harbour. Yeah. I went to uni in Newcastle, and now I'm in Melbourne. So I have friends all over the place. And so I was like, I know some of them are going to want the book, but Australia Post charges $10 to post a package. And I was like, it's expensive. It's so expensive. And the idea of saying, hey guys, the book is $25. It's another 10 if you want it posted, just felt really dirty to me. And like everyone's been fine with it. They understand like postage is postage and they just want to support me. But I had to sit there on Friday evening for about 3 hours, bubble wrapping books, putting everyone's address on things. Like it was such it's a time sink that's, well worth it. I loved it. It was great. Like put a movie on the background, pour a glass of wine, sign some books and wrap them up and send them off. But it was still like, I have to do that myself. Most authors don't have to do that. Yeah. So it's a big learning curve.
Yeah, I've had family members who've worked with distribution companies, not for books necessarily, but have had to do that kind of work, and it is a bit of a time sink, and you've just got to get it done because it needs to be done, and those kinds of things I don't think a lot of people really think about, because I think especially with the rise of Amazon and the more prevalence of Amazon here in Australia, instant delivery, back when eBay was a thing and they used to deliver things, it was like very easy to, have something and have it delivered for free, and it'd get there and it would happen within, a week, and it'd be all very simple. And then you go and do it yourself, and you've got, however many books you've got to, write the address on physically, and, package it all together, make sure it's all right, and then put it in a box ready to take it to Australia Post to send off the next day. It's absolutely a process. Yeah. Were there other things that you found really surprising about the self-publishing process that you didn't expect that you would have to get around?
Thankfully, having done like a very soft version of it at this point in time, it would be over a decade ago. Yeah. There was some stuff that I was already aware was going to be a thing. And so it made a lot of the stuff that were the speed humps in the first try turned into things where I was like, well, I know I need to, for example, getting like a proof copy, which just, it happens in the publishing industry. You get a proof copy to see how the inks look on the page and make sure all the pages are formatted correctly. which I didn't do in my initial print run. So, you know, when I did my trilogy when I was like 18, book 1 and 2 were perfectly beautifully formatted. Like, I was really happy with them. Book 3, for some reason, every title page, instead of being on the right-hand page, ended up on the back of the left-hand page. And I was like, and that's something that's like, that's not, like, that is a convention of books that title pages go on the right-hand side and it's on the left. And it, like, not that you lose all credibility, but it's like, you could have checked this. Like, my font wasn't embedded properly, so it ended up being in Times New Roman and looked awful.
I hate
and it was
Times
just
New
like
Roman.
it was just like everything that could go wrong on book 3 went wrong, which after doing it for book 1 and 2, you'd think, you know, this is going to be fine. No, book 3 stuffed it up. So this time around, I was like, okay, you know, I'm also like financially a little bit better off.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I can pay for a proof copy, which I'm glad I did, because when I did the initial book cover, I looked at it and I'm like, oh, the colors are a little bit washed out by the printing process.
Yeah.
I need to boost the contrast. I need to boost the saturation. And then like getting the subsequent copy and going, oh, there's a typo there, there's a typo, like that sort of stuff. So there was not so many surprises, but stuff that I had to remember and be like, okay, let's make sure we do this time. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the only other surprise was, like, because, I mean, I don't even think there's really any other surprises, really. I think the biggest surprise has probably been the fact that people have actually bought the book, which is for me, like, such a tremendous achievement, because books are, you know, at the end of the day, I can say to people, I'm a writer, I'm a book. You, like, from my own personal experience, you know, I've reached out to people before to read books because it's really great to get critique and feedback. And when you reach out to them, you might get maybe 15 people who say yes. And of those 15, you might get 1 or 2 who come back with feedback.
Yeah.
And the rest of them just like, it just sort of languishes on their bedside table and they never touch it. Mm-hmm. So there's a chance that, you know, 80% of these people will never read the book, but they bought it and I have their money now. So that's okay. You know, you have to be a cold hard capitalist sometimes. But, I think the fact that people have been interested in the book, have bought it, and seeing who is like, I'm really excited to read it. And it's like, I think that's probably been the other big surprise, because like at the end of the day, this is like stuff that I've made up. And so hearing anyone who is intrigued by it or feels like they connect to the story in some way is tremendously gratifying. Yeah. So yeah.
It's very, very fascinating, as you said, and kind of like kicked a realization for me. It was, you know, you're making stuff up. So it's like, you know, this is all well and good, you know, but I've made this all up. It's not real. But then, you know, people do take value out of it. And then that's where, like, I think then you just start to see the intrinsic value in your work.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I know. It's amazing. I can't believe that, you know, there are so many opportunities to do that kind of thing. It's amazing. Would you ever go back to a conventional publishing house to get books published? Absolutely.
So the big boon with self-publishing no longer being such a dirty word, I suppose, is publishers now do look at the self-publishing lists and go, okay, what's selling, what's popular, and potentially offer publishing. Like there's stories of, I mean, the big ones, obviously 50 Shades of Grey was self-published and then turned into a big thing. Like my book is very different from 50 Shades of Grey, but at the end of the day, it's a possibility. There's other authors in the fantasy genre, Evan Winter self-published his book and now is published through, I think, Galance in the UK. Like, there's that sort of stuff, which is like, if a publisher came to me and was like, hey, A Crown of Blood is selling pretty well, we'd love to publish it, I would love that, because there's some stuff that doing it yourself, you have to pay for yourself. Yeah. So I've had to pay for the formatting. I've had to pay for the cover art. I had a choice, basically, because I wanted to make sure I was making some good business decisions when doing this. And one of the business decisions I had to make was not skimping on the editing, but I made a decision where this book has been edited 7,000 times to send to publishers. Publishers have given feedback. I've made changes that I'm at a point where I'm like, no, I feel like the book is pretty strong. I gave it another 2 passes to fix up typos. But besides that, I was like, I think I'm just going to skip the editing because editing can cost, several $1,000s.
Yeah.
And I don't have that money.
Yeah.
So I had to make a business decision there. Whereas like if I went to a traditional publisher, they would you don't front the money for that. They pay for that. They have published editors in-house who do that editing for you and make the book sing. So if they approach me, absolutely would consider it. It would depend on where I was at that moment as well, because at the end of the day, a author does make more money self-publishing per book. Yeah. Which, it's in my situation, it's not a tremendous amount more, but it is more than what a publisher would get. So assuming, I'm able to build a fan base or a following, the opportunity to, make a successful, even if just like a side hustle out of it, is like a very real possibility. Yeah. But with a publisher, they obviously have the editing, they have the marketing, they have the distribution. Like I said, I know which online stores have my books. I don't know which brick and mortar stores, you wouldn't be able to walk in, but which ones can order the book in. Yeah. I don't know that yet. And I've still got to, I have to do the legwork to find out, okay, well, who can stock the book? It's available here, here, and here. So just that sort of stuff where it's like, if I had a publisher, I don't have to be a businessman as well. I can just be an author, and there's a real luxury to that. But I'm enjoying the opportunity to, one of the things that as a self-published author I get to do is pick my cover art. Authors, on the whole, unless you're very big, don't get a lot of say on their cover art. So, the book industry, especially in the last, I'm going to say decade, have made beautiful book covers and turned book covers into this beautiful art that, you don't see as many, shit book covers anymore.
No, yeah.
So, I'm not worried about that, but I got to have an illustrated book cover, which are normally tremendously expensive. I lucked out with my cover artist that her commissions were relatively cheap. Yeah. And I was like, you do some beautiful work. She upped her fees for book 2 and 3, and I was like, thank God, because you are worth so much more.
Yeah. Yes.
But that sort of stuff I get to pick and have a say on, as opposed to a publisher who they would do that. Now the trade-off there is I don't know. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't know. I know what sells in the market, and I know what book covers sell what sort of books, so I can do that. But publishers have a bit more, they have teams devoted to marketing and understanding, what covers sell, what covers don't, what draws people in. So I know what looks pretty, and I know what graphically looks nice, but I don't know what marketing-wise will sell.
Yeah.
So there's trade-offs there, but the short answer to that very long, the short version of that very long answer is yes. If a publisher came along, I would absolutely consider it.
Would you ever go and submit stuff yourself? Obviously, you're talking about if a publisher approaches you, but would you ever go out and seek them out yourself?
Absolutely. So I actually have. There's one book that I wrote after A Crown of Blood, actually, that's been on... so in writing land, there's a thing called revise and resubmit. And basically it's where you have submitted a book to a publisher. The editor at that publisher has read the book. They're like, I really like this. I don't think it's ready for me to take to a sales meeting or anything like that. I would like to have you revise it and resubmit it with some changes that I've suggested. Yeah. And so I've done... I think I'm on my 3rd round of revise and resubmit with this story with this particular editor. And she's brilliant. She has turned the book from something which was good to something which is really solid and has a really strong through line. And at the moment, we're in the middle of doing a sensitivity read. So the main character in this other book has has a prosthetic leg, and that isn't my life experience. And while I've done my due diligence and research and made sure I've done the best I can, I want to make sure I'm not being, accidentally offensive. I want to make sure I haven't accidentally put something in there that like doesn't apply. So there's stuff like that. So we're in the middle of that process there, and obviously the hope is on the other side of it. She then turns around, takes it to a sales meeting, and they're like, yep, let's publish it.
Yeah.
It's never a guarantee. But the good thing is, at this point in time, if it doesn't, I will theoretically have a little bit of a platform where I can self-publish it and, make a bit of money back off it. And, I think traditional publishing is still going to be my default effort for books that I want to try and publish. But for the ones that either... I've written, like I said, like at this point in like 27 books in, I have a backlog that I can, not work through the entire thing because those earlier ones are a bit shit. But, I have a backlog that I can work on and do something with. And there are some books in there that I don't think would sell well to a publisher because they wouldn't know what to do with it. And that's not because it's particularly weird or anything like that. It's just like... It's got a funny turn on this particular genre. It's, the characters are a little bit left of center. Like, there's stuff that I think would just sell better in a self-published market. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's totally valid. It's one of those things where I'm very fascinated by because you as an author, you're constantly pushing barriers and things like that, and especially yourself as a queer author, it makes it like another step on top of anything. Have you ever had experiences as someone of the queer community that have informed the way that your writing works?
I suppose writing is the saying is writing is therapy, and I do think that's quite true because I tend to finish a book, look back at it and go, oh, that's what I was working through for that book. I had a joke with my psychologist the other week because I said, he was like, oh, do you ever find what you're experiencing sneaks its way into your books? And I'm like, yeah, all the time. And he's like, well, what are you working on right now? And I was like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing has been, as far as being part of the queer community, is writing has been a tremendous boon especially in the early days of accepting my sexuality and accepting who I was. The book I was writing at the time was about a gay chimney sweep who was coming to terms with his sexuality. And I was like, that's very on the nose for what I was working through on the time. It's not normally so blatant, but there's that sort of stuff. I've now made it my mission, basically, to include as many queer characters as I can. I haven't had a straight lead for at least 4 or 5 books. Like, the main character in A Crown of Blood is bisexual, and I wanted to make sure I represent the world as it is. And, I think especially, like, we've had decades and decades of dudes writing fantasy about dudes.
Yeah.
And in the last, I'm going to say 20 years or so, we've started to see a lot more books with a lot more diverse casts. And so I'm not as, originally I was a little bit nervous to include it. I was a little bit nervous, especially writing for younger readers. When I was younger, especially, I was like, oh, is this appropriate? And as I've gotten older, I'm like, well, of course it's appropriate. It's like, the representation matters and seeing yourself in stories matter. I think if I was, the generation of today are so much more lucky. Like, you see the way they accept sexuality in a way that when I was at high school wasn't really accepted. Like, I didn't come out till I was 20, and there are kids who know who they are, and they figure out who they are early on, and they're like, 14, 15, they're like, I'm gay, and that's what it is. And everyone's like, thumbs up, great work. Like, I wish I had that. And I think a lot of that has to do with the media that we're able to consume now, where you have these positive queer representations of characters that, you see yourself in it. I was at a bar in Melbourne here, speaking to one of the bar ladies, and she was talking to me. I was just talking about my book, because she's like, what are you guys doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm celebrating my books. I've just pressed the print button, like they're on their way. She's like, that's amazing. What's it about? And I was talking to her about it, and I showed her the book cover. And the book cover, for the people not benefiting for the video, is it's the lead character, Rasheen, who is a woman of color. And the bar lady was also a woman of color, and she looked at it and she was like, oh my God, that's me. And that was like this really, really nice affirming moment where it was like people who don't normally see themselves represented, especially in like high fantasy, magic, sword and sorcery stories, get to see themselves represented. And, I'm not the first person to do that. Like I said, the last 20 years has seen a growing trend of that. But it's really great to know that the fact that my characters are queer aren't necessarily going to be a reason that the publisher will say, well, no. It might make it a consideration because at the end of the day, they run a business and they, having a queer lead in a contemporary novel is like, okay, that's the outlying thing. We can work with that. Whereas having a really weird magic system with a really weird plot with a queer character is like, oh, this is getting a little niche now. There's that sort of stuff that I still have to consider. But at the end of the day, it's nice to know that like someone's not going to reject the book because the main character is queer.
Yeah, I definitely think. And it's something that like even authors who traditionally wrote straight characters, I've got, I'm rereading the Percy Jackson series from the very start, and Rick Riordan wrote these characters, very like in the early 2000s, just on that 20 years ago mark. But you go and read some of his latest works, and they are so much more inclusive. You see so many more different kinds of people there, and it's so much more fun to read as well. It's one of the things, and trying to explain it to someone who may not be, who may not understand it. It's like, well, you see yourself, but like, why can't I see me or something? Obviously, I'm a straight white male, so like that, very, very much I see myself all the time. But like anyone else, like there are so many other people I know and I talk to regularly who don't often see themselves in media. Or, I have a very, very deep love for First Nations people and a very deep appreciation for their culture and their traditions. And, sitting there and seeing their culture and traditions appropriately represented in media makes me really happy because I get to see part of, my father grew up on an Aboriginal mission and, it gets to see part of what my family experienced, but also part of the community that is so important, especially here in Australia.
Yeah. I think it's really good that you can have those sort of opportunities to see, experience, like, things that you aren't necessarily familiar with, or that, like, I think that's one of the really big joys of fantasy is that while, some of it's fictionalized and some of it can be very unusual, you get this opportunity to experience a culture that's not your own. And, they say reading builds empathy, and like the fact that people read tend to have a greater empathetic understanding is so true. And I think, like in fantasy, I have this really great opportunity where I am not bound by the rules of the world, where, I can have a character of color in a place where, you wouldn't normally see, like in, Lord of the Rings, for example. We've got the Lord of the Rings adaptation coming out, and you have, the grumpy nerds being like, oh, there's an elf of color, they're not meant to be black, they're described as fair. And it's like, in the book they're described as fair, like, but you've also got dragons, so maybe like let people have like people of color, and that's going to be okay. I think there's recently there was the adaptation on Amazon Prime for The Wheel of Time, which I loved, and like I loved the books and I loved the adaptation, but what the adaptation did was they took the lead 5 characters, and in the book they are coded white. They are definitely coded white. There is like insinuations that they might be a little bit tanned, and they have dark hair and brown eyes, and so there's this like insinuation that there may be an element of that they're not necessarily completely white, but it's not, it's very much coded white.
Yeah.
But what they've done is in the TV show is they've sort of colorblind casted it. And so you have Egwene, who is one of the lead, like I would argue the lead female character in this entire series, played by Madeline Madden, who is a First Nations Aboriginal woman. And I think to myself, you know, it's not, you're not having their culture depicted because it's Wheel of Time, it's fictional.
Yeah.
But you are a person who is Aboriginal, you know, a young Aboriginal girl who sees Madeline Madden playing a powerful, strong woman on screen, and the effect that would have, that it's like, you know, build that person up and build their own self-esteem and self-worth is like, you know, this isn't just something for, you know, the white straight dudes. This is something that anyone can achieve power and greatness, and seeing themselves depicted that way is so meaningful. And so I think there's like this task that, you know, I make it sound like this weird like mission, but it's not really. It's just a case of I think there's room for everyone in my worlds, and I really want to make sure that that's explicitly shown and seen.
Yeah, and going on that, the whole seeing, you know, for example, Madeline Madden on, you know, your television screen as a young Aboriginal girl, it's the kind of thing that, you know, we're pushing to see in other, you know, in all industries as well. You know, we're seeing it in film because we actually get to see it, and it's something we see in our leisure time. But you see it in universities, you see it in, you know, authors, you see it in, you know, all kinds of aspects of life. And I think if you show people, I think back to, you know, Parasite and Crazy Rich Asians. You show those people that they can be incredibly successful and incredibly amazing at what they do, then they're going to be more likely to pursue those passions instead of settling for something that isn't what they really want to be doing. Because,
Absolutely.
you know, society has quote unquote dictated that they shouldn't be there. And I think it's one of those amazing things that art and the arts in general have done kind of on the side. Like with Oscars, the Oscars are a whole problem in and of themselves. But like art and society have done to bring about social change without, you know, without it feeling like we're invading. It's more like, here's some more diverse things that are already here and already being made, but let's just give them a little bit more attention, or let's give them a little bit more screen time. Let's actually give the woman character some lines, and maybe even pass the Bechdel test at the bare minimum. Like, you know, it's seeing those things and appreciating those things. It makes it so much more fun and leads to much more interesting conversations, in my opinion, as well.
Absolutely. I think one of the things with A Crown of Blood when I wrote it was I'd been not working with an editor, but I'd had some feedback from a couple of editors on some of my previous books where they talked about, you know, the lead female characters, and some of them, if the main character was a boy, if the main character was a girl, then it was fine. It wasn't an issue. But when the main character was a boy, the female character on the side, they would be like, she's a little underwritten. She doesn't have much to do. Can we give her something to do? Like that sort of thing. And A Crown of Blood was almost born out of the fact that I was like, okay, I need to make it impossible for me to have that issue. And so instead of, you know, you have the traditional lead trio, you know, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Percy, Annabeth, Grover. Like you've got the trio, and it's usually two dudes and a girl, or you have two girls and a dude. And I was like, screw it, I'm having 3 female leads. I'm doing Charlie's Angels. So, you know, it was like the trio in my book is born out of this thing where I recognize that, you know, I grew up mostly with female friends, and I was still underwriting the female characters, and I was like, okay, well, screw it, I need to make it impossible for me to underwrite it. And I think that's an unintentional bias that I had at the time, where it's like I looked at my reading list and I was like, okay, there is a lot of dudes in here. I need to shake that up, you know. There's a lot of, you know, just the same sort of stories. And it's like, I think there's a great opportunity as authors and creators to turn around and go, okay, let's, you know, just try and do better.
Yeah.
People, you're going to stuff up along the way. People are going to fall on their face. There's several examples of people trying to do something positive and it ends up blowing up in their face. But I think the main thing to take from it is, like, as long as you're trying, and that's my stance. It's always been, whenever people are like, oh, that's a really, problematic presentation of a queer person or a gay man.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're trying. It's like, they're doing their best. In 2022, it's a different matter. But like, you look at like Kurt Hummel from Glee back in 2008.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're watching that back. It's like, this is a very specific presentation of a queer character, but the doors that opened for subsequent representation where you can have queer characters who aren't, the cliche, flamboyant, that sort of thing. Like you end up with characters who are a little more nuanced and interesting and not just fulfilling a cliche or a stereotype, which I think, stereotypes exist for a reason, and sometimes you have to go through the stereotype to get to the more nuanced level. Like, I feel like it's one of those things where you have to walk through that door to get the rest of the way.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah, I think it absolutely is an opportunity to present more of the world and let everyone have a go, basically.
Yeah, and like more diverse places as well. I remember I was speaking to a friend of mine who was reading Lord of the Rings. She was doing it for the first time ever, and I can't believe this is the second episode in a row that I've mentioned Mary Clay Watt. That's what I'm talking about. But turns out that this might be a Mary Clay Watt fan account. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, she made this comment quite early on in her listening. She was speaking to someone who's quite familiar with the works of Tolkien, and they turned around and said, "You've got to realize that Tolkien and C.S. Lewis worked very closely together, and then there's a whole bunch of fantasy writers that came the generation after them. J.K. Rowling, a whole bunch of other authors who wrote very similar fantasy."
Yeah.
And yes, obviously, Lord of the Rings and The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and Harry Potter and, A Song and Ice and Fire are very, very popular books, but they exist within this, like, a view of what fantasy is. Yeah. And we can explore more diverse versions of that. Yeah. And I think it's one of the things, especially someone who's such a fan of film and television, is watching more film and television come to Australia. They've just announced that the new Godzilla movie or the Kong versus Godzilla movie, whatever, is being filmed. I'm in Brisbane, so like down on the Gold Coast. And there's a whole bunch of jobs going and lots of people are getting into that. And I've got friends of mine who are applying through it. And it's amazing because you'll get to see, parts of Australia, Joe versus Carol, which is on Stan here in Australia. I don't know where it is internationally, with Kate McKinnon. She came here to the Gold Coast to film it. And I think when you get to see more places that are diverse and interesting, obviously it's very Gold Coast centric, but when you go and film in the middle of Australia, or, there are beautiful spots in, the hinterland areas of the East Coast. Yeah. When you get to see those things, and then to an extent when, it translates to writing, and when you get to see new and interesting things that are reflexive of the author's surroundings, because they don't live, where all the authors live in New York or London or whatever. You get to see these really, really interesting and new stories that, like, I don't know, give a bit more of a new perspective. And I really appreciate that. That's one of the things that I really love about reading and watching things made by Australian authors and Australian filmographers, because it is different and it is a bit more nuanced as well.
Absolutely.
I was just wondering as well, why fantasy? Why high fantasy as opposed to other kinds of fiction?
I think so. I have like, I mean, I'm part of the Harry Potter generation. I grew up reading Harry Potter. You know, the author becoming a real problem aside, the books were incredibly influential to me growing up. I went, you know, I did the classic, you move from Harry Potter, you then go and, like, find some other fantasy books, you read Del Toro Quest. I think, you know, it's still a shame they haven't done something with Del Toro Quest. Like, do something. All the people in Hollywood listening right now, do something. But like, fantasy has this really wonderful thing that it can do where it can take the world we know and reflect it in a way that isn't possible in our world. We can show the best and the worst of society, put some fantasy over the top of it, and it's like, you know, the spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. It's like, you know, this isn't about this. This is about this other thing entirely. There's that. There's also the fact that fantasy as a whole is such a broad genre of opportunity to explore other genres. You can have the most interesting crime thriller with fantasy over the top. You can have a wonderful romance story and have dragons. You know, there's all this stuff where it's like you can do so much with it and essentially, you know, craft some really beautiful stories that have magic. And I think, like, the other side of it is fantasy is simultaneously, I would say, one of the easiest genres to write and one of the hardest genres to write because, one, you can do anything, but two, you can do anything and you still need to make it satisfying. And so I think there's a tremendous challenge that comes in when you are crafting the story, crafting the world. Like, I think I remember being a kid and I had this obsession with maps. Like, obviously fantasy books have maps in the front of them. Well, a lot of them do, not all, but you know, whenever a book had a map flicking through and seeing, like, where the characters had gone, like the front of Del Toro Quest, where each book is set in a different part of the world, you can see where your journey's going to go and where it's going to end up. And, you know, just that whole concept of being able to spend some time in a different world has always been tremendously enjoyable to me. I think escapism is a little dangerous because it suggests that you're ignoring the world entirely, when I don't think that's the case. I think some of the best fantasy and science fiction, for that matter, really holds it holds a mirror up to society and says, you know, this is what the world looks like, or this is what the world could look like, or, you know, again, this is about this, but it's actually about this. But I think I think some of the best fantasy, you can just do so much with it, and I think it's its versatility that really draws me to it. And just simply the fact, like, I enjoy magic. I enjoy creating a different world. I enjoy sitting there and being like, okay, I have all these problems I need to resolve. How am I going to resolve them in a satisfying way? But I've also got magic as an option, where it's like, one of my favorite authors, Brandon Sanderson, has his 3 rules of magic, which really 3 rules of writing, I would argue, that and the core rule is your ability to solve problems with magic directly correlates to your character's understanding of the magic. Which is really just a very longhand way of saying foreshadowing is important. And so there's a tremendous amount of pleasure I take in building this magic system, building this world, and finding an ending of the story that makes sense within the confines of the story, and works and is satisfying and fulfilling and doesn't feel like a cheap, like, you know, Deus Ex Machina or anything like that. And you know, and then you get to the end and it's like, you know, you've been on an adventure, you've explored another world, you've met characters that don't exist doing things that are impossible, and somehow you've connected still. There's still this very human element. And I think that's the other part that fantasy does really well, is building really strong characters that you can connect to. Because at the end of the day, you could have a story with the most interesting magic system, the most interesting world. It doesn't mean anything if you don't have characters to connect with, because that's where people are going to connect.
100%.
You know, I read my favorite series, the Stormlight Archive. Every book is 1,000 pages long. I'm not getting through that 1,000 pages unless I have the characters drawing me through it. Yeah. And I think that's like a tremendous skill of fantasy authors, and something that, you know, maybe one day I'll be able to achieve that level of quality. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing. And the work you're doing and the dedication that you have, I'm sure you'll get there in the end. It's pretty amazing to see a new author so excited. Well, not a new author, but like new to probably publishing stuff. To be so excited about the future. It's been very interesting. I managed to chat with Beth Rickles, who's a friend of the Movie Night Crew Network here, and she was really amazing to chat to. And she kind of had the same thing. She started quite young, and it was very fascinating to watch that, you know, she obviously went down a more traditional path. She wrote, you know, Kissing Booth and things like that, and it's but like, you know, at the same time, you can go down this less traditional path and still be able to dabble in other things, but still just have as much fun with it, which is, I don't know, it's fascinating, because I think there is a part to writing where people assume that you're not supposed to have fun or something, and that's totally not the case.
No, I think that's probably the biggest thing, because, like I said, this is the first time you know, we're going to count the initial self-publishing run 10 years ago, but this is the first time I'm doing a really good job of it. And the funny thing is with writing is it's one of the few things where if you say, I'm writing a book, the second question people normally ask is, oh, is it going to be published? If you play tennis on the weekends, if you go bowling, you don't then have people say, well, when are you going pro? And it's one of the few things where people go, you're writing, you must be doing it for publication. And I started when I was 13. It would be weirder for me to stop at this point. This is like, writing for me is intrinsically a part of me as breathing, so it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And part of the reason why I'm publishing is because a story doesn't really live until it's read. Yeah. I have it in my head and I know how it goes and I know how it ends, and there's a great amount of, you know, pride and maybe a little bit of hubris there where I'm like, oh, people are going to care about how this ends. But, you know, I had to sit down, you know, after 10 books or so, because I made a deal with myself, if I hit 10, I was going to stop. And I hit 10 and I was like, I'm not published, I'm not making money, but I enjoy this tremendously. So why would I stop? And, you know, some people have hobbies that they do. Some people have addictions. Some people, you know, do sports. And it's like, I think my thing's writing, and I'm probably going to write a book every year until the day I die. And I sort of accepted the fact that I was like, you know what? If no one ever reads these, I have to be okay with that. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. But I really want to sort of, I'm at a point now where I'm like, no, I think I'm ready to let people see the stories and read them. And, you know, it's not about the money, and it's not about the, you know, the fame and the fortune or anything like that, because that's close to not going to happen. But it's more about sharing it with the people who I care about, and maybe people who I don't care about at the moment, and they're going to care about the stories, or, you know, just connecting to a story in a way that is meaningful. So, I think, you know, even if I wasn't self-publishing, I'd still be doing it every day. But I think this is sort of a good opportunity for me to turn around and, you know, at the very least, you know, I've lived in Melbourne now for 3 years, and I've always been introduced as it's the writer, Lincoln, he writes books. And now I get to put my money where my mouth is and say, here's the book, you can read it now, tell me if it's shit. Hopefully they like it. Hopefully, I think they will. I'm pretty firmly of the camp that a fair few people will enjoy it. But, you know, it's still one of those things where it's like, okay, you can read it now.
Take it, go.
Go.
You've been teasing me for the last 3 years. Take it. Get out of here.
Get out. Go.
Well, on that amazing note, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Lincoln. It's really amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Chat to you. Like, I really I really enjoy chatting to people, and I don't know whether it comes across in the podcast, but I really, really enjoy listening to people's stories and hearing about different aspects of people's lives. And part of the reason why this podcast still exists is because it is just so fulfilling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if anyone was looking for you on the internet, where could they find you?
So I'm on Twitter at link_law, and that's Link with a K, like The Legend of Zelda. I'm on Instagram as Linkstagram389. And then my website's just lincolnlaw.com.au. Don't put the www in front of it. For some reason, apparently that's a different URL. So yeah, it's weird. But lincolnlaw.com.au is my website, and it has links to like where you can get the books and whatnot. So those are the main ones.
Yeah. Has there been anything that you've been reading, playing, listening to, enjoying that you want to plug?
Yes, I have been reading a book called American Hippo. It is, the best way I can describe it is it's like a Wild West story, but instead of the cowboys riding horses, they're riding hippos. And it's an alternate history novel. Basically, now this part is real. This part is absolutely 100% real. At the beginning of the 20th century, the American Congress turned around and there was a meat shortage. And they were like, how are we going to fix this? And there was a very short period of time where they were considering importing hippos and populating the bayou with it. It got put down very quickly because hippos are tremendously vicious creatures, and that's a really bad idea.
Yeah.
But that thing was like sat down and left there. 100 years later, this author has picked up this document and has read like the history of hippos being imported into America, and has basically created this alternate history novel where they've dammed up the Mississippi, they've turned it into a swamp, and now there's hippos and hippo ranches, and it's basically just like a Wild West adventure, spaghetti western, but with hippos. And it's one of those stories. There are so many books out there that I sit there and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? And I think that's my favorite thing as a writer is when I hear a story and I just go to myself, why didn't I think of that? Yeah. That is so good. That is such a good story. And it's like two novellas together. So you've got two little stories, but it's brilliant. I really loved it.
Wow. Can I get that name one more time?
American Hippo by Sarah Gatley.
Wow, that's amazing. For context, I don't have as clacky of a keyboard as Christina from wow, that's embarrassing, the restricted section, but I am quickly typing it down because that sounds amazing, and it sounds like American Hippo is like American Psycho as well. It like feels very very interesting.
It's very pulpy. It's very it's I just really enjoyed it. It was just one of those fun, not dumb. I say dumb like as in like it's a little bit mindless, but it's like you'll have fun with it. Yeah,
100%. And that's what you want to have. It's one of those things where it's fucking hilarious to do that kind of thing. Well, you can find me at sam.the.journalist on Instagram and on TikTok. On Twitter, you can find me at samobjournalist. The podcast socials are at the end in the credits, so make sure you check out and go them. Please, if you can, give a rating and review. That'd be amazing. This week, I'm going to plug a song called Lost in Paradise by two artists, Ali and Aklo. I don't know where this came from. It just kind of popped up on my Spotify. I think my brothers were listening to it, and we've got like a family plan for premium and whatever.
Joy.
And it is amazing. I like listen to this on repeat for days. Like it is one of those things. For any musician, it's like it's got the key change. That's like every song like this has a key change, and you understand it's like it's got the traditional key change or whatever. And but then you turn around and you go, okay. But then it like keeps going. It keeps getting higher and higher. And you're like, what is going on here? And like it's just a fun song. And it definitely feels like a theme song of if you've got a lot of work to get done in a day or something.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, but thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Lincoln. I really, really appreciate it, and I cannot verbally tell you how much I really appreciate chatting to you. It's been amazing.
No, it's been excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Content and Capable. You can follow the podcast socials at Content, the letter N, Capable on Instagram and Twitter. You can send a super boring email to us through contentandcapablepod@gmail.com. The art was done by Opia. You can follow them on opia_art on Instagram. Opia is spelled OPIA. Feel free to message them about making art for your project. Our music was written, recorded, and edited by Nora Strauss-Riggs. You can find Nora at Kane_I, that's I as in the body part, on Instagram and Twitter. Feel free to message her about making music for your project or editing your podcast. I am proud to be a part of the Movie Night Crew Network, which features the Restricted section, a chapter-by-chapter Harry Potter pod with lots of spoilers all the time, the Movie Night Crew, join some friends as they react to some terrible, some meh, and some really great movies, and Fandom's Gone Wrong, a show that discusses all things fandoms. My Cabbages, an Avatar podcast that follows the true hero of Avatar The Last Airbender, the Cabbage Cart Guy, and Of the Eldest Gods, a chapter-by-chapter Rick Riordan pod full of myths and legends.
Listen, we didn't want to be half-bloods.
If you're listening to this because you think you might be one, our advice? Stop listening to this podcast right now.
Percy Jackson had the right idea when he told people to stop reading the books detailing his adventures as a half-blood.
But we didn't listen to his warnings.
And that's why we started this podcast, Of the Eldest Gods, where we read books written by Rick Riordan and talk about how they affected us as kids and continue to as semi-adults. You can find us every Thursday wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you think we fooled them for a second there?
Gods, I hope not.
Bring on the monsters. We're making a podcast!
Content and Capable is a podcast all about answering the question, how do you adult? Don't forget to rate and review it on your favourite podcatcher, and I will see you next Monday for another episode.
That movie sucked. I kind of liked it.
Movie Night Crew Network.